Hey guys, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video, and for today let's talk characters. I wanted to make this video right away at the beginning of my Genshin content creation because I know a lot of content creators have been making those "oh my god, X unit is super OP, broken, wail for it now!" But I wanted to make a more focused video on everything you need to know about the units in Genshin, so I needed some time to learn more about the game and the system before I made a video. I guess better late than never. So after finally reaching Adventure Rank 40 last week and also spending way more money on the game than I probably should have, I can finally bring you a complete guide on characters, whether or not you still need it. As of right now, there are 22 playable characters in the game, with another 4 on the way in version 1.1. But I imagine if you're watching this video several months or years in the future, you'll have way more characters to deal with, but don't worry, most if not all of this information should still be valid because I'll be talking about the central gameplay mechanics, not so much which characters are strong. So whatever units you have, these points will still apply to. This is not a meta video or a tier list video. Of course, if they add some new mechanic, then I will make an updated one in the future. Because I'm anticipating this guide to go a little long, I've gone ahead and added timestamps in the video description for your convenience, so if you feel like skipping to a specific part of the video, feel free to do so. But before we get into units themselves, let me first give you an overview on the elemental system in this game. Each character in Genshin Impact comes with one of 7 elements: Anemo, Geo, Electro, Dendro, Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Wind, Earth, Lightning, Nature, Water, Fire, and Ice. Supposedly there's an 8th element coming along, which I can imagine will probably be Light or Darkness, maybe both, not sure. Anyway, the unit's corresponding element dictates not only their traits in combat, but their party synergy as well. Coming in contact with certain elements will apply status effects that are pretty self-explanatory if you played any RPG game in the past. Cryo slows your movement speed, Electro can conduct onto other targets if they're wet, Hydro causes you to be wet, and no, water is not wet, water makes things wet. Lastly, Pyro burns for damage over time. Simple enough. The most important thing about elements is their reactions. Combining any 2 elements together will trigger a special effect on both enemy and player units, depending on who's affected with what. I'll give you a rundown of all the available ones. Combining Dendro with Pyro will cause burning, dealing bonus fire damage over time. But at the moment there are no Dendro units, so you don't really need to worry about this. Putting together Geo with Cryo, Electro, Hydro, or Pyro causes Crystallize, dropping crystals that can be absorbed to create a shield that blocks a certain amount of damage, but it also offers more resistance against elements of that same type. Combining Hydro with Electro causes Electro Charge, dealing bonus Electro damage over time. Cryo and Pyro inflicts Melt, which deals 2 times damage if Pyro was dealt after Cryo, or 1.5 times damage if it was dealt before. Electro and Pyro will cause Overload, which deals a burst of AoE Pyro damage. Cryo and Electro create Superconduct, reducing target's defense and dealing a burst of AoE Cryo damage. Putting together Anemo with Cryo, Electro, Hydro, or Pyro will cause Swirl, absorbing the merged element and changing the Anemo's attack to that element. Lastly, Vaporize deals double damage if Hydro applies after Pyro and 1.5 times if applied before. I know it may seem a little overwhelming, but it does become second nature the more you play the game, so if you're still confused on which element does what with another, I'll be sure to add a link in the video description down below that sends you to the wiki page for elements. The last thing I want to talk about elements is resonance. As you know by now, you're allowed to carry a party of 4 members at a time. And because each unit comes with their own affinity, when there are certain combinations of elemental characters in the party, the entire party receives a bonus. As of right now, you get bonuses when combining 2 of the same element or by constructing a party of 4 different ones. I'm not sure if they have any plans to add others, like maybe 2 Geo, 1 Electro, or 1 Anemo, 2 Hydro, but that's all there is for now. You'll want to keep this in mind since they greatly affect your team building. Okay, now that we're done with elements, let's get into the units. When opening the character selection screen, the first thing you see are the unit's attributes, displaying their max HP, attack, defense, elemental mastery, max stamina, and friendship. Friendship is not really related to the game at all, it's just if you want to know a little bit more about the characters that you're playing with. HP, attack, defense, they're self-explanatory, and your stamina is just your ability to glide, sprint, climb, and swim for longer periods of time. Elemental mastery is how much damage a unit will do from elemental reactions. The higher your mastery, the more damage you will deal from Overload, Superconduct, Melt, Vaporize, Swirl, etc. Higher elemental mastery gives you stronger shields or Crystallize as well. If you click on the details portion, you will see advanced stats, many of which are conventional traits you see in other games. Crit rate is the probability of dealing a critical hit with each attack. Critical damage is how much bonus damage you deal from a critical hit. Healing bonus increases how much HP you recover from items and abilities. Energy recharge influences how fast your elemental burst tree fills. Cooldown reduction affects how often you can use that elemental skill and burst. And powerful shield is healing bonus, but just strictly only affecting shields and not healing. Scrolling a bit further down, you have every single elemental type damage bonus and resistance, as well as physical damage bonus and resistance. Damage bonus causes you to deal more damage of that element, while resistance causes you to take less damage of that element. Compared to most other RPGs, Genshin is relatively simple in its attributes, not too many things to know about, which is good for the uninitiated who might have a harder time figuring out gameplay conventions. You'll notice a row of stars on each unit under their name as well as their level. At 0 stars, they're at the initial Ascension phase, so their max level is only 20. Characters do receive experience upon killing monsters, but they're drops in a bucket. The main way to level up a character is with character level up materials. These can be obtained through a myriad of ways such as Stardust Exchange, opening chests, completing quests, etc. You'll just gradually pick up more and more as you play the game, and as long as you don't spread your resources too thin, you should be able to keep up with at least 4 characters even as a free-to-play player. Each time you reach max level, you'll be allowed to ascend your characters to the next phase, which is where the stars come from. Every character requires 4 materials for each ascension, and as you ascend more and more, the rarity of the materials would become more costly as well. First, you need a specific elemental crystal corresponding to that character's element. So Electro units need purple crystals, Pyros need red, Animos need green, so on and so forth. After that, you'll need your elemental boss drop, which conveniently is also your main source of crystals. Don't worry, as your adventure rank increases, so do the rarity of the boss drops, so they will keep pace with you as your characters get stronger. Next, you'll need the unit-specific pickup item and normal mob drop. Since these 2 items are limited in supply, it's in your best interest to farm them every single day, even if you can't immediately ascend the character, because you certainly will need it in the future, and every day you spend not farming is a day you'll never get back. To an extent, the boss drops and crystals are also limited, but you can sort of circumvent that by spending Primogems on resin. I highly advise against it, but the option is still there. Character Ascension is available based on your adventure rank, so starting AR 20, every 5 levels you will be able to rank up your character another phase. By the time you reach AR 45, you'll be able to get them to max level, which is currently 90. I can imagine they're going to increase it to 100, maybe 150, 200 in the future. Just be prepared to spend a lot of time collecting materials and mob drops to get them up. So I'm going to skip artifacts and weapons right now because that section deserves its own video. And of course, if I were to condense them all into a single one, we'd be staring at like a 40-minute guide, so we'll get back into it at a later date. Moving on, let's check out Constellations. Constellations are this game's limit break system that you may recognize from other gacha games where you need multiples of the same unit to make your main one stronger. Whenever you pull a duplicate unit after the first one, instead of receiving another copy, you'll simply receive a Stella Fortuna, which allows you to unlock a character's constellation, and you need 6 of them to max out a single character. In other words, you need to pull that character 7 times to reach a max constellation. Currently, there's no universal Stella Fortuna that you can farm in-game or the like, so legitimately the only way to get more of these is to do more summons, and that's been a source of controversy among most of the community because given how low the rates are for 5-star units and how expensive it is to pull, on average, if there's no rate up banner for that character, it could take you well over $3,000 to $4,000 to max constellation of 5-star unit, which is unequivocally insane to expect anyone, even mega whales, to get on one 5-star, let alone every 5-star. But rest assured, constellations are not necessary for a good character, at least not entirely. Yes, some constellations can be game-changing, but given the current challenge of the game, you don't need them. So don't stress too much about maxing them out on a 5-star unit, especially if you're going free-to-play. Lastly, let's go over talents. I touched on them in my previous video, the Advanced Guide, which I also recommend you check out if you're progressing through the game quickly. But to recap, each unit comes with 6 talents, 1 for their basic attack, 1 for their elemental skill, 1 for their elemental burst, 2 character passives. The first unlocks at your first ascension, which is 20 to 40, and the second unlocks at your 4th ascension, which is 60 to 70. Finally, a world passive, which provides a bonus for your gameplay ranging from faster expeditions, to item radar, or even bonus dishes when cooking. The passive talents stay locked at level 1, but the combat talents can be upgraded by way of talent materials, which can be farmed in the domains of mastery. Just like character ascension, you can only upgrade talents up to a certain ascension phase, so every time you level up your talents, you will also need to level up your adventure rank. In terms of which ones you want to level up first, it largely depends from character to character. For example, if you're working on a healer, you don't really need to level up their basic attack because they're not the main DPS. Or if you're working on a support, you may want to boost their elemental burst as quickly as possible. It largely depends on character to character, but the best way to decide is to first figure out what role they're supposed to be. If you want to build them as a support, as a DPS, as a healer, or ranged DPS, so on and so forth, a simpler way to look at it is to level up talents on your main damaging unit first. I'll talk more about team composition later though. By the way, don't use any fragile resin on talents, they're the last thing you want to spend your moons on, so if you were thinking about dumping extra resin, don't. Your talents are important, yes, but they're not that important. Take your time with them so long as you keep up with them. If let's say you don't have to ascend anything on your weapons or whatever, then use that day's resin to farm talent materials instead. Okay, so huge info dump aside, much of which you probably already knew about, let's get into the part of the video that's actually useful to most of you. How to build a proper team composition. There's many ways to go about this, so I'll lay them out for you. You can build your party around a main single DPS, you can build a party around a dual DPS, you can build an all-purpose party for travel, combat, and bossing, or you can do something really gimmicky around elemental resonance and reactions. So let's start with the first one, constructing your party around whoever your main DPS is, whether it's Razor, Keqing, Diluc, Xiangling, Beidou, Chongyun, so on and so forth. Single DPS comps are arguably the most popular one because since you're only allowed to have one unit out at a time, it makes sense why people have only one person doing all the damage. Certain characters go really well with others, especially if you factor in elemental resonance. Not the most popular example, but since Frozen is one of the most powerful reactions in the game, I have seen people who build Chongyun as main DPS and use Xingqiu and Barbara as support, so you can basically chain freeze. Alternatively, if you want to go super electro, you could pair up Keqing with Fischl for high voltage resonance, and then bring in Xiangling for overload and Xingqiu for electro charged. This way you can maximize Keqing's consistent electro damage output. So if you were trying to go for a solo DPS party, you would want to have 2 supports and 1 healer, or 3 supports if the healer can also double up as a support. I've seen someone try Diluc and Chongyun, which allows you to spam Melt using Chongyun's elemental skill to change Diluc's basic attacks to be Cryo, and then Diluc's Burning Onslaught brings in the Pyro. Always make sure you're carrying around a healer though, such as Barbara, Jean, Chi-Chi, or Noelle, since healing items can get very expensive, and of course in Spiral Abyss you can't use any. Now you can have a dual DPS composition. For those of you who don't know, DPS is damage per second, which is the composition I actually like to run. Certain units like Razor and Keqing are a lot better in long extended fights due to their faster attack speed, while units like Chongyun and Diluc are more burst oriented, making them way more effective when fighting enemies that have shorter vulnerability periods such as the elite bosses. The benefit of having 2 carries is that it allows for more flexibility because elements have counters. You might run into situations where your main attacker is completely useless since the enemies you're fighting are immune to that attacker's specific element. But it's also just more fun because it can get kind of boring sticking to one character only, so I use Keqing as my main attacker, but against targets that I need to kill fast, I switch to Diluc. I understand not everyone has a bunch of units to play with, but even someone like Xiangling and Razor can work too. The only downside is that if you have 2 units purely for damage and they carry no supportive skills, you are down a support unit, so you won't be nearly as efficient as solo DPS. Essentially, you trade output for more coverage. The balanced team comp option is sort of the same thing where you have a melee attacker, healer, support, and your 4th unit can either be a ranged attacker like Ningguang or Fischl, as well as a tank like Noelle. The last one is sort of a cheese tactic and usually only works for players who are either really rich or really crazy. No doubt you've probably seen clips on Reddit of people like Barbara doing insane damage to pyro units or someone running Noelle for super tank DPS and stuff like that. Basically, this applies to very specific scenarios. For example, if you're fighting a lot of pyro enemies or if you're fighting a lot of electro enemies. Generally speaking, it is better to stick to a solo attacker or dual attacker party as the game is still pretty easy. We don't have any content in the game that currently requires you to really figure out a good team composition aside from maybe Spiral Abyss. Maybe in the future, I definitely see bosses and dungeons coming in that specifically require, let's say, Geo or Anemo and the like. The last thing I want to mention about characters is whether or not you need 5 stars. I know this sounds somewhat incredulous coming from a guy with a bunch of 5 stars, but you can easily pull through this game without spending a dime or getting super lucky with rerolls. I know some people are really stressed about getting a specific unit, like if they want Chi-Chi or Mona or Keqing or Diluc, but you really don't need them. A max Constellation Razor can statistically do 2 to 3 times more damage than Diluc or Keqing. Even a max Beidou can do that. And in the end, it comes largely down to whatever you want to play. The game is not super difficult to the point where you gotta grind your gears to complete it, at least not right now. Yes, conceptually 5-star units are leagues ahead of 4 stars in terms of capability, but for those who go super crazy on getting a C6 Diluc, that's almost the equivalent of bringing a calculator meant for calculus and differential equations to a multiplication and division quiz. It's nice, just not necessary. Okay, I think that covers it for everything you need to know about characters in this game. If you're looking for character-specific guides, there's a ton of them you can reference, so I'll do my best to leave all the information you need in the description down below. But if you have any specific questions about a unit, like if you want to know how to build Mona or Venti or Sucrose, you're more than welcome to ask in the comments section. Alternatively, you can join my Discord server and ask there. We have a few members aside from myself who are also in the late game and they can help you as well. But guys, if you'd like to support my channel, best way you can do so is leave a like, comment, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for future uploads. Be sure to check out my Discord server again if you want to play and chat with other members. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitch to catch my live streams, but for now, that is going to be it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for the next video. Take care.